Okay, whenever you're ready.
My partner and I strongly agree with the resolution the benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms. But before we go into our three contentions, we would like to define the phrase offensive cyber operations. The United States military defines offensive cyber operations as operations intended to project power by the application of force in or through cyberspace. Cyberspace is defined as the online world of computer networks and especially the internet. Our three contentions include offensive cyber operations protect the United States, it would be more effective than using only defensive cyber operations, and finally, offensive cyber operations provide additional options short of conventional military operations that would have been previously employed. Less harm is done by the United States by using offensive cyber operations. Contention 1. Offensive cyber operations protect the United States. At a recent cybersecurity event at Georgetown Law School, Richard Lidgett, former deputy director of the National Security Agency, cited well over 100 countries around the world are now capable of launching cyber attacks. The United States is already a part of an ongoing cyber battle with countries such as China, Russia, North Korea, and others. According to the Department of Defense's cyber strategy summary in 2018, malicious cyber activities to harm United States citizens and threaten U.S. interests are on the rise globally. This summary goes on to report that the Department of Defense will defend its network system information from malicious cyber activities. We will, however, defend forward cyber operations targeting the department. Contention 2. Defense cyber operations are not as effective as offensive cyber operations. According to James Andrew Lewis, Senior Director of the Technology Policy Program, a purely defensive approach cedes initiative to the opponent and leaves the defender in a reactive posture. No military would choose that. The United States Department of Defense seeks to preempt harmful cyber activity targeting U.S. critical infrastructure in order to defend the U.S. homeland and stop threats before they reach their targets. The difference between offensive cyber operations and defensive cyber operations is proactive versus reactive. Cyber attackers averaged more than 5 breaches each day as of 2016, according to Verizon Data Breach Investigations report. As of 2018, the Department of Defense's summary repeats that the United States government has trended towards more offensive cyber operations as compared to the defensive. Unless the United States continues to use offensive cyber operations, the United States would be more subject to continuous and persistent attacks on the networks, states the Active Cyber Defense Certainty Act. Contention 3. Less harm is done by the United States by using offensive cyber operations. Evidence from the Center for Strategic and International Studies article The Rationale for Offensive Cyber Capabilities reports that we need not moan about the horrors of cyber war. People have let their imaginations run away with consequences of cyber attack. It's not a weapon of mass destruction. Unlike nuclear weapons, cyber attacks have strategic effects without mass consequences. An example of a successful offensive cyber attack the United States launched on Iran was in June 2019. It is reported to be successful. It provides response options short of armed conflict. Brandon Valeriano, a researcher on cybersecurity and international relations supports the statement by reporting that these cyber operations, which happen to be offensive, can help de-escalate deadly militarized disputes. My partner and I strongly affirm the resolution that benefits the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms for the following reasons. Offensive cyber operations protect the United States. It would be more effective than using only defensive cyber operations. And finally, less harm is done by the United States by using offensive cyber operations. For these reasons, we strongly urge a pro-ballot.
Resolved. The benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms. My partner and I disagree with this resolution because of the 3 facts that cyber offenses can affect civilians, cyber warfare can easily spiral out of control, and that the U.S. is unprepared to fight cyber warfare. Contention 1. Cyber warfare can affect civilians. According to foreignpolicy.com, the Stuxnet virus was a virus that affected systems and altered code in a way that made it too risky to run centrifuges in Iranian nuclear facilities. It pushed back Iranian nuclear development by several months, or as some experts believe, several years. This horrifying virus could very easily affect the wrong target. Just like how we have seen in past military actions in the line of war, non-combatants can very easily be harmed. Instead of just a bomb destroying a civilian's home, which is devastating on its own, think about how an entire city can just be thrown off the electrical grid. This would make hospitals lose power. This would make ovens, stoves, and microwaves unusable, and they can eliminate your access to fresh water. If the U.S. were to continue the use of these cyber offensives, there is no guarantee that they won't affect the innocent. Contention 2. Cyber offensives can very easily spiral out of control. During the Cold War, there was a philosophy known as mutually assured destruction. This was a common belief that given the time between an ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, being launched, being detected, and hitting their target, other countries would launch their own ICBMs, which would destroy the planet. This was the main reason of proxy wars like Korea and Vietnam, where America and the USSR never actually fought one another. With this new type of almost instantaneous warfare, if a new Cold War were to ensue, then the state of war would very easily be able to turn hot, since there is almost no way that another country would retaliate in time. This could topple the biggest countries in the world within nanoseconds. Unlike nuclear war, the United States should not be the ones who introduce this new state of terror. Contention 3. The U.S. is unprepared to fight cyber warfare. According to RollCall.com, in an article by John M. Donnelly, who leads military reporters and is part of the National Press Freedom Team, the U.S. has lost a total of $1 trillion in intellectual property, including data on F-35 fighters, combat ships, anti-missile programs, and drones operated by the U.S. military. The article also says that the U.S. has been compromised at such an extraordinary rate that it is starting to become unreliable. If the U.S. does not have a strong enough defensive force, then there is no reason to continue offensive action. As we have seen, America is one of the biggest targets for cyber attacks. If we continue to try and pursue offensive actions, then that will only give countries more reason to attack us and paint a bigger target on our back. In conclusion, with the three main reasons against the U.S. pursuing cyber warfare being that cyber offensives can affect civilians, cyber warfare can very easily spiral out of control, and that the U.S. is unprepared to fight cyber warfare, my partner and I strongly urge a calm balance.
So in your first one about how it affects disability, we talked about like power outage or going off the grid. Would these be because of our cyber offenses, or would this be because of our defenses of it?
These would be because of attempts for offensive strategies. So if you try to go on offense and it backfired and it affected.
So would those be our country's offenses or other countries' offenses who are getting through attacking?
Those would be our country's offenses.
Okay, and then, so in your second one, you're talking about it's out of control. Do you have any examples of how it has been out of control already?
We had the Stuxnet virus where it infected systems and it altered the code. So it was too risky to run centrifuges.
And then and going off that, so you're saying that was like spreading to civilians, correct? Or like that it was affecting civilians. Who was that?
For this one, we were talking about how it pushed back to the Delta for several years.
In your last one, you were talking about like losses in money and stuff. Are those just alone from our cyber offenses, or are those like over cyber technology combined, or are those from other things as well?
These were from This was from our other strategies. We lost $1 trillion because of how we were already going through things.
So it's not necessarily 100% of cyber offenses.
It was, well, when we were trying to be offensive, we lost $1 trillion in our intellectual property and our data.
Could any of that have been because other countries were trying to attack us and our defense, it was more because our defenses weren't working so now our offenses?
No, it was because we had been focusing on offense and not defensive force.
Partners ready? Partner ready? Judge ready? Alright. I'd like to take this time to further strengthen my partner and I's claims before addressing our claims made by our opponents. Once again, our three contentions include cyber operations protect the United States. My partner already cited that 100 countries around the world are now capable of launching cyber attacks. And these cyber attacks that harm the United States alone, they are growing continuously each day as the threat remains. And we should take a proactive approach. Proactive meaning acting in anticipation of future problems, needs, or changes according to the Webster Dictionary. We should act proactively and fight these possible cyber attacks before they even start. In our third contention, my partner gave an example of a successful cyber attack that the United States used on Iran, and it was reported to be successful and provides response options short of armed conflict. And to further our evidence in contention 1, in 2013, U.S. networks were already under constant attack from sophisticated nation-state actors. Hackers stole millions of sensitive records from the office personnel management, gained access to White House networks, and destroyed dozens of computers at Sony Pictures from thousands of miles away. The United States have since shifted their focus from defensive operations towards offensive operations, which makes it easier to stop these problems before they even begin and get to the United States defensive system. I believe that during these cyber attacks that the United States have launched on other countries, they still have some defenses in place, because I don't think the United States would be that ignorant as a country to leave their systems open and vulnerable to other nations to attack them. In my second contention, defensive cyber operations are not as effective as offensive cyber operations. We stated that the best weapons can be used for defense or offense. How they're used depends on national intent, and the risk of using them depends on how closely a nation adheres to international law and laws of armed conflict. A peaceful nation that adheres to international law has nothing to fear from acquiring offensive cyber capabilities. Putting this into simpler terms, it means that if a country is peaceful with, in this case, the United States, that country has nothing to fear from us. We would not cyberly attack them. So, civilians in that nation would not be hurt. In our second contention, we also reported that no military would choose to fully rely off defensive military approaches alone. So why should our cyber operations be solely defensive if our military isn't solely defensive? The answer is because solely defensive never truly works. Nothing gets accomplished except occasionally blocking some attacks from foreign countries facing us. To review, our three contentions once again are that cyber operations protect the United States. It would be more effective than using only defensive cyber operations. And finally, less harm is done by the United States by using offensive cyber operations. We strongly urge you to vote pro-ballot. Thank you.
The facts are that the U.S. is not ready for cyber offensives. As my partner said, we have already lost $1 trillion from intellectual property from other countries attacking us. We need to strengthen our defense before we start using these cyber offensives against other nations. When we provoke other countries, this, as my partner said, is a very risky type of warfare. If we do not strengthen our defense, then us provoking other countries would only give them more and more reason and incentive to attack us. My opponents said that cyber attacks, that 100 countries are capable of cyber attacks, and that we should have a proactive approach. Does this mean that we should attack all of these countries? If we were to attack countries with cyber capabilities, then that would just lead to a global conflict that would be beneficial to nobody. They also said that my opponents also said that we would not, if a country that is following laws of our nations would not be attacked, and that just proven by history is not true. If we think back to World War II, from Finland, Poland, and all of the countries that Germany and the USSR tumbled over in the opening days of the First World War, or the Second World War, then we can obviously see that if we follow all of the laws provided, that we can still be attacked. They also said that countries do not want a defensive position, and that is true, but if we continue to use these cyber offensives and push these countries' boundaries hopelessly there, then that will just give them more and more reason to attack us. This in mind with the facts that the U.S. is that cyber offensives can affect civilians, cyber warfare can very easily spiral out of control, and the U.S. is unprepared to fight in cyber warfare, is why you should have a combat.
Now we'll have
Sorry.
cross player.
Alright. You can ask the first question.
You brought up 100 countries that are capable of cyber warfare. What exactly should we do about these countries?
I believe that not all of these countries pose a threat to the United States alone. Some of them could indeed be allies. They're just countries that are technologically advanced enough to launch a cyber attack. You said, can you explain more about the expenses of having like an offensive cyber operation attack and how it affects the nation's money or something? You said that,
Expenses.
yeah, you mentioned something about the United States spending like $1 billion.
We mentioned that the U.S. has lost $1 trillion in intellectual property from other countries' cyber attacks, and I followed that by saying that we should invest more heavily into our defensive capabilities before we invest in our offensive capabilities.
So that $1 trillion was only for the United States getting attacked and us responding to it? That was what the $1 was for?
The $1 trillion was in intellectual property about data on F-35 fighters, combat ships, anti-missile systems, and drones operated by the U.S. military. It was basically a breach of the U.S. military that saw $1 trillion worth of research going into mass production and ship vehicles aboard being thrown out the window.
Okay, so if we would have used a proactive response, this problem could have been avoided, correct?
What do you mean?
If we would have stopped this problem from even happening in the first place by using an offensive approach to that problem not exist.
We didn't know that this problem was going to happen. They completely blindsided us, and our defenses currently were not capable of protecting against that threat. And if we were to get blindsided like that again, we would have a chance of protecting ourselves, and we were to enrich our cyber security over cyber offenses.
Okay, do you have any further questions? I have one more. That virus you mentioned, the one that wiped out a bunch of systems.
Iranian subtype virus.
Yes, did that take place in the United States or somewhere else?
It took place in Iran, and the point that we were making through that was that if other countries can very easily produce a virus similar to that, and it can affect civilians if they do not use it as carefully as we did.
So you gave an example of a successful offensive attack that the United States used against someone else, and how is that a bad thing?
Because it's very risky if we start dipping our toe into this pool of unpredictability. If, as I said, if other countries were to gain this technology, we could see entire nations be thrown off the electrical grid.
Okay, no further questions.
Time. You want to use prep?
Yes.
32nd choose. New Year's 57.
Summarizing this debate, my partner and I agree with the resolution that the benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms. Our opponent's first contention was that it affects our country's civilians. They gave an example of a power outage or people being able to take us off the grid and how it could prevent hospitals not to tend to their patients properly. However, this has not actually happened, or they haven't given an example that has happened in the past. Our first contention is that it protects our country. In the last crossfire, our opponent said that we were blindsided in an attack, and that our defenses weren't prepared enough to take on this attack. This is why we have been increasing our offenses to help out our defenses in situations like when situations like this occur. My partner and I strongly affirm the resolution that benefits the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms, and for the following reasons. Offensive cyber operations protect the United States. It would be more effective than just using our defensive cyber operations. And finally, less harm is done by the United States by using offensive cyber operations. For these reasons, we strongly urge a vote.
If the threat posed by other countries when it comes to cyber warfare is growing, shouldn't we focus on our defenses before developing our offensive force? Our opponents said that offensive cyber warfare is much better than a solely defensive strategy. To refute this, my partner and I believe that it wouldn't have to be solely defensive. We believe that we should first develop our defenses so we don't make ourselves a target and that we're prepared, as the defensive strategies have currently cost us a great amount. Once again, to review, with the three main reasons against the U.S. pursuing cyber warfare being that cyber offenses can affect civilians, even electric grids. Cyber warfare can easily spiral out of control, even into war, and that the U.S. is unprepared to fight cyber warfare, as we've said. My partner and I strongly urge the ballot.
Yeah?
Yeah, sure. You guys can have the first question if you like.
You guys said that it is true that we haven't seen any large-scale blackouts like you mentioned, just like how we haven't seen during the Cold War a large-scale nuclear war unfold. These are simple theories of what could happen, and they are what would most likely happen if we were to go to war with another large-scale world superpower. What we were saying wasn't that we have seen these effects. We were saying that we can firmly assume that that is what will happen.
But even though you could assume it's what happened, wouldn't you say that's not necessarily what could happen or what's going to happen instead?
There are a lot of possibilities, but we can definitely make a very educated prediction on that it will happen.
So wouldn't you say that the benefits that have happened from the offensive cyber operations have been worth it for the country?
I would say not, because these cyber offensives, as we have said, they painted a large target on our back and only give countries an incentive to attack us with these same capabilities. And as we have said before, we can make a strong educated guess that these cyber offenses, that if we were to go to a cyber offensive war with other countries, then everybody's quality of life would be over.
So you're saying that if the times that that the offenses have protected our country haven't been worth it?
What do you mean by protecting our country?
Well, there's been several cases where we've attacked other countries
that were about to attack us, so we just got to them first, and that prevented our country from facing consequences from what could have happened for those attacks. Well, in the long run, they have painted a target on Iraq, and they were very risky situations.
Can you give an example?
Actually, it's the one that you gave, where it was the attack, the United States attacked Iran. That is an example of the United States' successful offensive cyber operations.
As we also said, that will be delayed to develop by a year or so, and that just gives them more incentive to attack us, would you agree?
Not exactly. If defensive, in this case, cyber operations work so well, then how come physical militaries don't only use solely defensive operations?
We're not saying that they work well, we're actually saying the opposite. That is why we should invest in these defensive capabilities over these offensive ones. Like how we said with the $1 trillion lost in the whole
But
information.
like you were saying, just to grow the defensive operations and not pay attention to any offensive, but this question still applies to that. After you have grown defensive operations and you have no offense, how is that supposed to work? We'll just continuously get attacked and attacked. We won't be able to fight back.
With our strong defense, we would be able to ensure that these attacks would not do any major damage. And as the resolution, we're not saying that we should never further our development. We're saying that we should currently be focused on furthering our defensive capabilities before we push for our offensive capabilities.
Time?
What this debate really boiled down to is what is better, defense or offense, but that isn't in the resolution at all. The resolution is the benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms. The pro side has given many examples of why that statement is true. Using offensive cyber operations goes hand in hand with defensive. The United States would not rely solely off offensive. They would have many defensive cyber operations in place in case there was a counterattack. All we are claiming in this case is more good things occur from cyber operations than bad. And my opponents claim that many of these things could happen. What we need to take into consideration are that these are all possibilities and none of these things have happened to the United States. Once again, we strongly urge you to vote pro.
Vice President.
Yep.
Everyone's ready? I'm ready. As my partner, I have said we must ensure that our defenses are stronger. As the resolution says, the benefits outweigh the harms. As we have seen, the U.S.'s use of cyber offenses without a strong defense has only given more incentives for other countries to attack us. As my partner and I have said, we must ensure that we have a strong defense before we focus on our offense. This, along with the facts that the cyber offensives can affect civilians and cyber warfare can very easily spiral out of control, and that the U.S. is unprepared to fight in cyber warfare, is why my partner and I strongly urge a con amendment.
Thank you for judging.